Okay, welcome back folks. We're going to finish off this painting now. Just going to start off by adding some foreground area, midground and foreground area. This is where it's going to really give distance to the painting. So we've got all the rocky area. This used to be a bit of a quarry, this part of the park. And then we're going to come down into some of the greens and maybe even one or two little bits of burnt siennas as well. So I'm just going to do a big wash to start with. I've got the trusty size 20 brush and I want to mix up a few colours for this one. Natural grey is going to be good for this, for the rocks. So I'm going to use natural grey with some burnt sienna. And that'll give me a bit of a sort of golden grey colour. And then I've got some natural yellow by itself as well. There it is. And then of course I want quite a lot of green for this. And I'm actually going to use two greens. I'm going to use aureolin and a little bit of natural blue. That's what I call a mid-green, or an average green. And then we want a really bright one, which is lemon yellow, limoncello as I call it, with some blue. And that's a much brighter green. You'll probably see a difference in the two. This one will really leap forward, the lemon yellow one, okay? And then I'll add one or two other colours as I go along. So I'll mix as I go. Okay, so I want to use some of the rocky colour first. I'm going to paint this in. There's quite a good browny colour there. But there's a few other tones in there. There's bits of sand. In fact, I can probably on the photograph see a little bit of burnt sienna as well in there. So again, already I'm mixing as I go. I'm just going to work it across. The big brush is doing most of the work. I want to have some grey on its own as well. And I'm leaving the white edge. Leaving the white edge, and you'll see why in a minute. It will all become clear, hopefully. Bring it across, a bit more grey. There it is. Okay, now the reason for the thin white edge is because I'm going to go for a smaller brush. This is a size 12. Just make sure it's not soaking wet by wiping it on tissue. And I'm just going to lightly soften this towards the top until it just kind of fades away, water, tissue, and make it all disappear up to that line at the top there. There it is. There we go. And then it's the same over this side as well. And then I can just lightly soften the edges as it comes into this little footpath area. And I like to just skim over the top of these rocks, but kind of using a bit of a sort of thicker grey brown colour, that's grey and burnt sienna, and actually adding a bit of a direction to this, so turning it around and adding a bit of a directional effect to the rocks. So I'm going to turn it that way and change direction. There we go. And then this kind of spills down into the grass. So it's all about brushstroke direction. And it's what I call, you might laugh at this, but I call this nonsense painting, because it's just sort of putting your brush into nonsense mode by turning the red bit at the end and just kind of working in different angles with it. But there's no real definition. This is the bit where people can be too precise with the painting, but we don't want to be too precise. Let's get a bit of water on there just to lightly make all that disappear away. And then I'm going to get the palette knife again and put some rocky bits coming down. So using the side of the palette knife, I want to flatten it and actually drag out some rocky areas. Now different palette knives, as I mentioned, have different surfaces. This is the biggest one in this set, has got a real flat end to it, so that'd be ideal for this. Where the paint lets me, I mean some areas are dry, but actually adding craggy rocky areas, all part of the quarry effect. Turn the board over a little bit, but kind of stepping it all down. Don't be afraid to scrape it. Try using the side of your palette knife sometimes, that can be quite effective. It kind of scrapes the paint off, giving more of a shape or a texture to the paper. Every so often just wipe off the paint. There we go. Excellent. Okay, so that's given quite a nice effect to that. Put a few rocks using a size 6 brush and a nice bit of natural grey. Don't be afraid of the dark. We're going to put some detail shadows in. Just angle the board at this point. Just every now and again I want to add like a little bit of a drop down, and then using a bit of water, wipe it on tissue first, and then just lightly soften it all into the actual area. And you can probably see how it puts like a bit of a separation between this chunk and that chunk. And you can put as many of these as you want. I'm probably just going to creep one in there. It doesn't matter where the light is, because it was literally lunchtime when we did this, so the sun was literally there coming straight down, so the light spreads anywhere. And that's something what people don't realise until you go outside and actually look at nature. If you just paint indoors, a bit of a misbelief sometimes is that the light comes from one direction, but of course it only does in the evening, in the morning. So just think that light comes from anywhere, any area, in any position. There we go. So I'm just putting a little bit extra cracks and detail for the rocky area. So that's given quite a nice little mini quarry effect there. Okay, I'm going to come back to the big brush and put some green on. But I'll use the 20 for this. And I'll use the nice aureolin and natural blue. Now this is for the distant area. This follows the footpath. I think that's a cracking green for grass. And then with a dry brush, just lightly work it into the rocks. I always think a little bit of extra yellow just at the closest position always suits the autumn theme. And then it just comes over this side a little bit. It goes around the bend, as they say. It's a fantastic place to visit, Poulter Park. It used to be an old colliery site, but it's been there for many, many years, and it's really, in the autumn, in the spring, it's absolutely wonderful. I've got the lemon yellow there, which will really give some colour to the foreground. Just going to let it all kind of work in. If you happen to get a bit of dry brush on the edges, then that's all part of the effect. So you can see the brightness there. It really has made a difference to that picture, really bringing it out. And then I'll go for the size 10 or 12 brush again. Treat this as a bit of a tidy up brush, so it's just damp. And you can just lightly soften away some of the edges on the grass there. I want to put a little bit of burnt sienna in there, but very, very dry. Turn the board that way for this. Burnt sienna, dry brush. Just going to sweep in the corner there a little bit. Maybe just a little hint coming over that position. Just to add a slightly variant colour to it. And then use a bit of any old muck out your palette. I'm sure you've got plenty of that. And then we're going to do a bit of a dry brush effect over the footpath area. There we go. And then really just to finish off, a nice bluey green. Blue and a bit of yellow. Very, very dry again. Make your brush go flat. Pinch it. That way you can put some grassy texture right in the shadow areas For example, coming in from that side of the picture there. And if the detail's in the foreground interest, it will help to push everything else back into the distance. And I always think a wonderful finishing touch is to come back to the tree and texture brush, use a really thick yellow Oreo linen blue, give it a bit of a stipple so it's nice and spiky. Use the tall hairs of the brush and right in the corners, flick in, stroke in. This is something to practice. Practice stroking. If you've never stroked it before, have a bit of a practice. Right in the corners. Put a few little bits of grasses. Foreground interest. Little bits of foreground on the edge of the footpath. Drags the viewer into the distance. Use your finger to blend it in. And even as far as the palette knife would be lovely, just to give a little bit of scratchy grasses right in these corner areas, because remember what we said, foreground detail is the thing that really makes it work. So there we go folks, a nice finished watercolour picture. I always think it's nice to get the tape off. When you do take it off, pull it away from the picture just in case, you know, you don't want to rip your picture. But it's always nice, it's like putting a frame around it, removing the masking tape, because it just gives a crisp, clean edge, especially on a nice, colourful picture. You can see it's ripped there, but that's literally in the corner, so it doesn't matter. And there we go, a very nice, warm and cosy autumnal watercolour scene. Right, before we take our final break, we've just got time to cross over to the other side of the studio and join watercolour wonder Geoff Kersey as he lifts the lid on his selection box of tricks.
So let's have a look today at what's in my box. I'm going to open up the top here and you can see that that's just full of paint, dozens of tubes of paint. I'm always advocating using a limited palette and I don't use all those colours. But what I've tended to do over the years is buy a tube, try it, not really like it, and it's just ended up in the lid there, taking up space really. So if we then open it and take that section out, underneath I've got my palette, a hairdryer. The main thing is the is this brush easel case. I'll show you this because these are very useful. I keep my brushes in this because if you leave brushes lying around in the top loose, if when they're wet, the tip of them gets pushed up against the side of the box, it curls over like a hook almost, and you can't get rid of it. You lose the point off that brush. Whereas something like this, and it's looking a bit weathered and scruffy, I realise that, but that's years and years of use. But this is a hard case, brush easel case, and as I bend it back like that and use the Velcro tabs on it, I can just stand it on the desk or table wherever I'm working, and the brushes are there ready to use. Very simple idea, but very good, like most simple ideas. And it really does look after the brushes, put it straight back in the case when I've finished. In the top here, there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, one of the things I often do, I use quite heavyweight paper, and to fasten it to the board, it's a lot quicker than using masking tape on it. I staple it down. So I've got a staple gun, staples, and of course, I'm often asked, how do you get the staples out? Well, that's the pincers there. I'm quite fond of using mechanical pencils when I'm drawing. It's not that they're any better than the traditional pencil, but you always get a good point to them. You don't have to keep sharpening them so long as you keep them full of pencil leads. And I tend to favour a 0.7, a 0.5, and a 0.9. That's the sort of size of the lead that they take, and it gives you different size lines for whatever, for if you're doing a more detailed painting or a looser, more basic painting. And then I just keep the leads in here as well, and that just saves all that. As I say, saves all that sharpening. I've got various felt tip pens. That's not for cleaning my teeth. That's often used with a ruler against it to do splattering. Not a technique I use very often, but it's there for when I do use it. That's it really. There's loads of clips and all sorts of things. Putty rubbers. I do try to avoid using stationary rubbers if I want to remove any pencil lines before I start painting, because the stationary rubbers can mark the paper. They put marks on the paper that you don't even see until you start applying the paint. So you always need nice soft putty rubber, so I've got half a dozen of those in there. A natural sponge for wetting the background. But one thing I can see from looking at this box, because I haven't really paid much attention to it, even though I use it nearly every day, is that it's due for a good clean out, so I think I'll tidy it up and throw some stuff away.
Thanks, Geoff. I think we're all guilty of not having a regular spring clean. So I think I'll make a quick start. While I do, let's take a quick break, folks. Join us in part 4, when popular SAA watercolour artist Marilyn Allis demonstrates how easy it is to resize a picture, ensuring that your proportions and layout remain accurate. And I'll be answering another of your artistic questions from the Splashy Paint Postbag. We'll see you soon.